and a move that signifies some sort of acceptance of Biden winning the election, while also, of course, walking a tightrope between the conspiracy theories on the right of massive voter fraud and the acceptance of the election. Fox host Tucker Carlson has conceded at least one point, that Biden's victory, his margin of victory, is just too insurmountable for any allegations of fraud to install Donald Trump as president for a second term. In fact, here's what he said on his show about that last night. Take a look.
At this stage, the fraud that we can confirm does not seem to be enough to alter the election results. We should be honest and tell you that. Of course, that could change. But changing the election results is not the whole point. The real point is that fraud took place, and that should horrify us. If you want people to believe that our system is real, that our system is worth, say, joining the military and dying to protect, then you've got to get to the bottom of what just happened, and you've got to do it as quickly and responsibly as you can. You can't have fraud in an election because no one will believe in elections, and then things fall apart. The point isn't that we need to keep investigating until Donald Trump wins. That is not the point. The point is we need to find out what happened so that the rest of us believe the system is real. And to make that happen, Congress ought to investigate every meaningful claim of illegal voting. Every legitimate claim that is raised must be investigated. Would that become a circus? Of course. Would a congressional hearing on voter fraud descend inevitably into partisan posturing? What do you think? Yeah, it's guaranteed. But there's no choice. It's still worth it. An investigation like that, a federal investigation, would produce facts. And we need facts.
He's right. We need facts. And the fact is that right now, there really isn't any credible instances of voter fraud that's investigated. I mean, what could you confirm? The voter fraud that we could confirm. What voter fraud? In Michigan, the evidence that they brought in several court cases that are currently ongoing, and some that have been outright dismissed, one of the pieces of evidence was a literal Post-it note written by an alleged unnamed poll worker. Did that poll worker exist? I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows, because that poll worker, they won't reveal the existence of the poll worker, who it really is. And all it is that it's basically a Post-it note saying, I believe I saw some people improperly counting ballots. Oh, did you? Okay, great. So that's your evidence. That got thrown out of court. And look, what about the so-called evidence of Democrats bringing in suitcases full of ballots? That turned out to be nothing more than camera equipment. Look, the thing is, the reason that we haven't had any sort of ruling on voter fraud or any, instances of massive amounts of ballots being rejected in these swing states is because their evidence doesn't exist. It is very, very flimsy. And so it's nothing more than the realm of conspiracy. And let me give you another example, right? In Arizona, there's a woman named Jill Stock, right? So Jill Stock is their so-called example, their smoking gun, that there's voter fraud, that people are going in and they're stealing the ballots, man, from people. And they're making people vote twice without their consent or without their knowledge, right? So she says, well, I went to go vote in person. But it turns out I had already voted by mail. But wait, I don't remember voting by mail. My vote was stolen. Well, okay. So here's the thing about that. So they found the ballot, which indeed there was a ballot that was mailed. And it had her exact signature. Now, either this is an incredible forgery, or it was made up, and that she had actually sent that ballot and then went to go vote in a second time in person, which is not uncommon for Trump supporters to attempt to do, which generally is the only voter fraud people tend to find, is the one the Republicans do themselves. So it is pretty interesting. And by the way, the fact that that I can call it like super suspicious, super sus, why I think that she is lying about this is because when given the opportunity to certify 100% via a legal binding affidavit stating that my vote had been stolen via mail. She refused to sign it. She refused to sign it and refused to certify that indeed her vote had been stolen. And so why would you not sign something like that? Why would you refuse to do that? And so understandably, there is no certifiable evidence of widespread voter fraud. But of course, Tucker Carlson likes to thread the needle a little bit. He's not a dumb person. He's actually a very intelligent person. He knows how to do this. He knows how to thread the needle and how to get enough people to believe that there is voter fraud. It's just that we can't catch it. And he also has a tendency to paint the left as saying things that they're not actually saying. So there is no evidence of widespread voter fraud. Now, he'll go and say, well, the left says there's absolutely no voter fraud whatsoever. That's not entirely true. There are instances of voter fraud, but they are infinitesimally small and therefore are never enough to swing any sort of election. And so he also tries to appear reasonable in admitting that, well, yes, voter fraud exists and it's a massive problem, but it's not quite massive enough. But we should be really worried about it, and we should have Congress go and do a circus. Now imagine, right? And here's the thing about this. You don't even have to imagine. You know why? Have you heard of the Trump Voter Fraud Commission? This was a Trump administration, and maybe he's counting on you to forget that this happened. But the Trump administration, the administration that is most vested in pushing the myth of voter fraud, of mass voter fraud, okay, had a commission made up of Republicans that were going in to specifically point out massive voter fraud. What did they find? Nothing. There were no massive results. And the whole thing, the whole exercise, fizzled, withered on the vine. Because it's just not a major problem. And so, look, the thing is, Tucker Carlson knows this, but he's trying to save face, knowing that Donald Trump was unable to get mail-in ballots thrown out in Philadelphia. These are, again, illegal votes that were postmarked by November 3rd, and according to Pennsylvania law, were 100% valid. And in fact, look, a lot of states have different laws on when the ballot should be received and counted, and there were even Supreme Court cases in the run-up to the election, November 3rd, to which the Trump administration had tried to challenge these states into not allowing these ballots to be received by a certain deadline, to actually reduce the deadline, and they were successful in a couple, but unsuccessful in others like Pennsylvania. And look, the other thing is that you had just a sheer amount of mail-in ballots that went for Biden should not be a surprise. Now, conservative media is especially spread. Oh my God, look at how big the leads got after the election. Well, that's when, and again, the laws in states are different. Some states did not allow you to start counting mail-in ballots until after November 3rd, which of course, on election night, gave Donald Trump the appearance that he was winning in these states, which is just, again, what we call the red mirage. Once you started counting the ballots that were mail-in, that were heavily weighted towards Joe Biden, you had that change. But again, these people who are sometimes savvier than you, sometimes, in a lot of cases, not, because Donald Trump really generally believes that he won this, can come back and say, why the discrepancy? Why did that lead just evaporate overnight? Oh my God, how could that happen? How could it happen? It must be the deep state. It must be fraud, but it's not. It's not. Democrats voted overwhelmingly by mail. That's not a surprise. And so it shouldn't be a surprise that the votes that were being counted after November 3rd by mail went overwhelmingly to Joe Biden. You know why? Trump and conservative media told everyone not to vote by mail because it's rife with fraud, while, of course, Democrats, as a result of coronavirus, did vote by mail. And let me tell you, as somebody who voted absentee, it's fucking amazing. I will never, unless I have to, vote in person ever again. Why? Because it's easy. It's fucking quick. There's no lines. There's no bullshit. There's no driving anywhere. No, you get your mail. You get your ballot in the mail after, of course, you request it. I'm in one of the states where you have to request a ballot. And so you give them, you give them your information, your social security number, your name, your address, so they can, of course, match it to make sure that you're not somebody who's requesting a fraudulent ballot. And then a couple days later, your ballot comes in the mail. You mark it. You put it in an envelope, in a security envelope, and then you privacy envelope. That's what it is. And then you put it in your other envelope. You close it up. You sign it. You date it. If you have somebody that's filling it out for you as a guardian, they have to sign that affidavit as well. And then you put it back in the mail, or you drop it off. And that's it. That's it. And you didn't even have to worry about coronavirus. And so it makes sense. It is so much easier. It is so much faster. And that is the major problem. That is why they don't like this, because it actually gets people to vote more. It's so much easier, and that is why they hate it, because it renders a lot of their voter suppression techniques invalid. Long lines? Don't worry about it. No long lines. Vote by mail. So now, if you're a busy person, you can fill it out. 5 minutes, you're done. That's, of course, if you've done your research beforehand and who you want to vote for. If you didn't, well, that might take a little bit longer to figure out who you want to vote for. Then again, you could always vote straight ticket, depending on the state and locality you live in. And so, of course, different states, different rules with that as well, different elections. That said, there are effective safeguards at play here. That said, does voter fraud exist? Yes, it does. That said, it's the amount that you can prove. It is infinitesimally small as a result, as a share of total ballots cast. The most likely incidences of what you could call fraud are usually a result of human errors, software issues, or people not following directions, which should, of course, be part of human error, but human error on the parts of, for example, ballot people who count the ballots, election officials, etc. So I feel like it's kind of different, but very rarely is this malicious. Sometimes, yes. In the part of voter suppression, that is very malicious. But out of millions of ballots, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, there have been a handful of cases of actual in-person voter fraud. And generally, it tends to be Republicans saying, I was just testing the system. Generally. Not always, of course. And again, it's not the same as electoral fraud, which is an issue, like, for example, ballot stuffing. But then, also pretty rare. So those are the facts. Tucker Carlson knows the facts. He's not a dumb person. But the facts just happen to not quite fit the narrative. And so in a way, this is sort of his mea culpa in saying, oh, well, I mean, there's voter fraud and it's super serious, super serial, and we need to investigate it. But also, it's Donald Trump didn't win. And that's why, of course, MAGA people are pissed. They are boycotting Tucker Carlson's show as a result of this, of all things. Snowflake. Sad. Maybe. But look, here's the other thing. I've got one more piece of video here from Tucker Carlson, which is just some hilarious Zen type of thing. But I want to show it to you anyway, because it's just great. Take a look.
How do we fix it? How do we bring the country together? How do we calm things down? How do we make an America you want to live in? And the only answer, the only solution is honesty. Let's all stop lying. Lying about everything that matters, every day of our lives. That's what we're doing now. Have you noticed?
Oh, I've noticed some people are lying. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.